at the Indira Gandhi National Open University talking to the Vice Chancellor of IGNOU. Sir, as we know that we are celebrating the 70th anniversary year of the bilateral relations between Russia and India. So, if a few words on that.
Bilateral, I recall my childhood days. Whenever our parents will speak of international friends, Russia will be the first name on their lips. Uh, I was a child when 1965 war was fought. And our parents were always talking about Russia as a close friend who was supporting us, as against the entire international community going against India. So there was a special attraction about Russia. There was another important reason for Russia becoming so popular among the Indian young boys of those days. Russian literature was made available in Hindi in a very big way. And Russian folk tales were very attractive. They were so beautifully printed books. They were so attractive to young minds. I recall I had something like 10 to 15 of these books, beautifully printed books, which in 1965 were very rare to find. They were available for a very cheap price. They were nicely translated into Hindi, and therefore a large number of young boys those times were attracted to this. So Indo-Russian relations are not only bilateral political relations, they are relations at the cultural level, they are relations at the level of literature, they are relations at the level of they are relations at the level
People
of heart.
to people, yeah, heart
At,
to heart.
at the level of heart. Every time we talk of Indo-Russia relations, we talk of Raj Kapoor.
Right.
But it is also a reality that a large number of Russian folk icons became popular among our own people. And I recall a large number of our friends who were attracted to Russian dresses, who were attracted to Russian manners.
Right.
So that is the reason for this kind of a relationship. And the other fact is that for 70 years we have been friends. There has not been any crack in our friendship,
Correct.
which in itself is a proof that this relationship is very strong.
Of course, we have traversed a very long history. 70 years is quite a long period for any person or even for any country, and it's a very important part in the history of both our countries. But we should remember that our relationship, the relationship between India and Russia, were established much earlier, not even centuries before, but thousands of years before. You maybe know about the studies of Russian as well as Indian scholars who established that there are so many connections and there are so many similarities in the Vedic Sanskrit and in Old Russian language. Roots, words, and many other things connected to the morphology, to syntaxes, and other aspects of grammar. You can find in Vedic Sanskrit, in Sanskrit itself, and in Russian language, even modern Russian language.
I heard you talk about the Indo-Russian relationship and how it has been similar over the centuries, the Vedic traditions, and can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, this year we will be celebrating, we started the celebrations of the 70th anniversary
Yes.
of establishment of our diplomatic relations.
Right.
But of course the history of our relationship, relationship between Russia and India, they go back to
The Vedic
deep-
times.
Yes, they go deep to the history. Like they are centuries old or even thousands of years old. We can find a lot of similarities in language as far as Vedic Sanskrit is concerned, as far as Russian language is concerned, modern
Right.
Russian language and old Russian language. We can find a lot of similarities in geographical names in Russia and in India. And of course we know a lot about the travelers who came to India, say several centuries ago, starting from the middle of 15th century. And then later there were not only merchants, they were scholars who studied Indian languages, Indian culture, who traveled to India just to understand Indian people, to understand what is this country. And culture of India is very popular in Russia. Since
Raj Kapoor films, would you like to talk a little bit about?
Everyone is talking about Raj Kapoor, but there are many other
Okay.
personalities who are very popular in Russia. Many artists.
Classical artists?
Classical artists, of course, not only cinema actors, but your musicians, your singers. They are very, very popular in Russia, and I just admire the fact that in Russia we can find a lot of people who are just involved in yoga training, who are learning how to dance Indian classical dances, Bharatnatyam, Kuchipudi, Kathak. So, and it is very, very popular tradition, well established for many years, since maybe 50, 70 years already. And during the last period, it becomes more and more popular. The interest to India, towards India, is growing.
Right.
Especially, you know, for us, India opened in real terms since the end of 80s, beginning of 90s, when it became much more simple for Russians to travel all around the world. And India became one of the places that is very, very popular for tourists, not only for tourists, but the people who want to know more about the spiritual life of Indian people. And they go not only to Goa to relax there. They
Also Varanasi.
They go to Varanasi, they go to Haridwar, to Rishikesh, they go to Himachal Pradesh, to many other places, in their spiritual quest.
India and Russia, who has always been great friends, you know, that is why we have seen it closely. That what is the need? The need is, of course, that as both the governments, both the leadership are happily announcing many other schemes, whether it is Make in India, whether the especially privileged partnership between these two countries. There are many Russian
Defense
partnerships, many other, you know, personnel are needed to cater to the demands of both India and Russia equally.
Right.
So that is why we thought of celebrating these 70 years of completion of 70 years of this great partnership between Russia and India, and we have succeeded well.
It's a very fertile field. When we look at Indian academia at the level of school education, college and universities, our students are studying Russian icons of literature. Pushkin, for example, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Boris Pasternak, all the major figures. I mean, you name it and you'll find a huge level of familiarity and acquaintance with these Russian academic literary traditions. So I see when we are discussing Indo-Russian literary cultural traditions, it is very meaningful if we collaborate at all levels, particularly literature. I am developing a course on world literatures, for example, and we have a strong Russian component there. Our students are showing great interest in that, and which augurs so well for the next, we are discussing educational interests in the 21st century.
Russian has a very vast literature. I'm basically a literature research scholar, and I was influenced by the writings of various Russian writers like Anton Chekhov, then Gorky, and presently also I'm working on literature, Russian literature. I'm doing a comparative analysis, and it always brings and due to the cordial relations that both our countries share, it brings out a keen interest कि हम इसको पढ़ें और लोगों में बढ़ाएं. So
to reach out to more people,
yeah,
and
exactly.
so that they also develop an interest in the language.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So can I ask you to say a few words in Russian, like how are you or something like that?
The first word that we learn, like before even learning the alphabets in Russian, is Здравствуйте. That means hello.
Okay.
So this is one thing that we have to continue when we start learning Russian, even though we don't know how to read and write, but this word is intact with us throughout the learning process. So it's Здравствуйте.
Okay. That was wonderful. Hello and welcome to DD India. I'm Shivani Pandey. We have all read about the revolt of 1857, the brutal suppression of the Indian people at the hands of the British attracted the attention of the Russian people. It evoked an immense sympathy amongst the Russians for the Indian rebels. Russia was quick to start diplomatic efforts, having decided to open a consulate in India. However, the British government obstructed the move to issue a permit, and so a Russian diplomatic mission in Mumbai could only be set up by the year 1900. Another important stage in the Indo-Russian ties came during the Russian revolutions of 1905 and 1917, which had a huge impact on the national liberation movement of India. Not only Raj Kapoor films, but Indian music, dance, yoga, and even Ayurveda are greatly appreciated in Russia. It is even surprising to know that not just Hindi, but other Indian languages like Tamil, Marathi, Gujarati, Bengali, Sanskrit, and even Pali are taught in Russian institutions.
Friendship between India and Russia goes back a long way. April 13th saw the commemoration of 70 years of diplomatic relations between the two nations. Recently, a seminar on 70 years of India-Russia relations, The Way Forward, was organized by the School of Foreign Languages, IGNO. The guests were Sergei Karmalito, Senior Counselor, Russian Embassy, Vice Chancellor in charge, IGNO, Professor Ravindra Kumar, and Professor Anju Sehgal Gupta. The seminar was well attended by many high-level dignitaries, academicians, research scholars, and learners. In recent times, with growing mutual respect and admiration between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Russian President Putin, the collaboration between the two countries has gone up many notches. Taking off from the meet between the two state heads in Goa in 2016, the next summit meeting will be held in St. Petersburg, the old capital of Russia, on the 1st June of 2017, where many bilateral collaborations will be discussed. It will not only be an occasion for Indian people to know Russia better, but also give more impetus to collaborations between the two nations in fields of military, finance, industrial, and education. In his special address, the guest of honor of the seminar, Mr. Sergei Karmalito, the senior counselor, Russian Embassy, said, the present friendly relations between the two nations has a deep historical context at many levels.
And we are hopeful that there will be many, many events this year. We have a special roadmap for celebration, and there will be very many events in the coming months, not only during April itself. Like there will be a visit of our Vice Prime Minister in May, who will be heading the delegation, Russian delegation, to participate in the Intergovernmental Committee meeting to prepare the summit meeting of the President of Russia and the Prime Minister of India that will be organized for the first time not in Moscow but in St. Petersburg, the former capital of Russia. It shows that we also change the scenario of our contacts with the leadership of India, and this will give another opportunity for Indian people to know more about Russia, to see such a wonderful well-known places as St. Petersburg, and for your Prime Minister to visit again this part of Russia. We expect that this visit will bring a lot more for development of our relationship in various fields. And first of all, it will touch upon the cooperation in energy field, in nuclear power field. It will, of course, bring more impetus to the cooperation of Russia and India in military technological field. As you know, Russia occupies first place as far as cooperation in this field is concerned, and closely followed by Israel and the United States. And of course, we'll add a lot to to this cooperation by signing documents that deal with cooperation in investment sector, in financial sector, in such fields as production of modern instruments for different fields of industry.
Coming to the present scenario with PM Modi at the helm of things, how do you think the two countries are progressing? We've heard of a joint session in the month of June.
Well, as you know, there was a last summit was organized in Goa, and it was in the mid of October last year, and very important documents were signed there, and very strong contacts were established, personal contacts were established between your Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, and our President, Mr. Putin. So they understand each other very well. They have this kind of chemistry in their relationship.
Dwelling on the significance of the Indo-Russian bilateral, Prime Minister Narendra Modi wrote in his Facebook post, "India and Russia have been trusted friends for decades. It acquires added significance in the current global scenario."
And it is obvious when you just look at the photographs that were taken during their meeting, the summit meeting in Goa. So we are hopeful that the coming next summit, it became a tradition for India and Russia to hold each year, to hold annual summits. So next summit will be held on the 1st of June in the city of St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg, as you know, is the former capital of Russia. It's a beautiful city, and the time when the summit will be organized, it's maybe the best as far as the season is concerned. Your Prime Minister will be able not only to see the beauty of St. Petersburg, but of course to discuss very important issues as far as our relationship is concerned, bilateral relationship, and international issues. Correct. We have certain negotiations regarding the further development of our relationship in nuclear, peaceful use of nuclear energy. You know that we are constructing a huge, most powerful nuclear power station in Kudankulam, and now we are finalizing the documents on the 4th and 5th units and 6 units of this station. So we are looking forward to have another site for another nuclear power station that will be constructed in India. So Russia now is the only foreign country that effectively cooperates with India in this very important field. So we hope that there will be discussions only on development of our cooperation in the energy field, like oil and gas, and many other things like
There are several embassies and establishments, trade establishments, where trained language teachers and language interpreters are needed. And these language interpreters also get a lot of money because each page of translation is paid in a very big amount. So that is the kind of interest because of which our students have started taking language courses. And Russian is one language where, because of the bilateral relations between India and Russia and nuclear energy cooperation, defense cooperation and all that, a fairly good number of students are needed for translating Russian documents into English, English documents into Russian, and facilitating basically the traders and such people who are interested in bilateral relations. So that is giving them, I mean, our courses are getting a lot of interest, and that is giving our courses a fillip insofar as student interest in our language courses are concerned.
The first consulate was established in 1900 in Mumbai between British India and the Tsarist Russia, and regular political updates were dispatched to St. Petersburg. Nana Mgaladze, Councillor Culture, Russian Embassy, also shared her ideas in the discussion.
It's very enlightening that we are here together, and congratulating IGNU with the opening of the courses certificates of the Russian language. It's really a pleasure to know about it, especially this year when we are celebrating 70 years of diplomatic relations between Russia and India. Mr. Carmelita has already mentioned and touched upon about on several issues that we have to discuss maybe today during our seminar. I just want to add one more thing. Mr. Carmelita has mentioned about the universities that we have a lot where Russian language is taught, not only in Delhi but also in Calcutta, in Mumbai, in Hyderabad, in Punjab, in Himachal Pradesh, in Chennai, and in Trivandrum. I also want to mention about schools. Because in Delhi we have only 5 schools where Russian is taught. In Calcutta, in Mumbai, and in Chennai, and in Trivandrum as well we have schools where Russian is taught. So I hope that students who are taught in this university and in other universities too will go to those schools to teach children, and hopefully those children will be brought to your universities, and I'm sure that the quality of their language, the quality of their knowledge of Russian language will be much higher than of their teachers. So this is the only point that I wanted to emphasize.
Professor Arun Mohanty from Center for Russian and Central Asian Studies, School of International Studies, JNU, threw some interesting insights on the history of 70 years relations between the two nations. He has also authored a book on the same subject.
And the Russian Language Department for opening the certificate course, particularly this year when we celebrate the 70th anniversary of establishment of diplomatic relations between our two countries. I'm sure this is kind of a landmark event, a signal to the future at a time when our relations are growing further. Russian language was always very popular in India after English, particularly in the 70s, 80s. I remember when I was a school child, perhaps every second university in this country had a Russian language certificate course. And in many cities, there were offices of ISKCOS, Indo-Soviet Cultural Society, which also ran Russian language courses. They were very popular, and there was a lot of demand for Russian language, for studying Russian language. Just recently, I was talking to the director of BrahMos, Sudhir Misra. He's a very leading scientist, virtually the leading scientist in our missile program right now. So he was telling how, as a school child, once he just got hold of a journal, Soviet Land, and started reading about Soviet Union and got interested in Russian language and in Russian science. He comes from a very humble background, and this was a very humble beginning for him, the Soviet Land, and his first introduction with Soviet Union began with this journal, and he started learning Russian language. And by learning Russian language, he came to know about the development of missile technology in Russia, and he was fortunate enough to pursue a career which brought him to this position of director of BrahMos right now. You know, BrahMos is one of the best missiles that we have produced. And right now we are thinking of, it is a super missile, but we are also planning to build a hypersonic missile, BrahMos. So Misra is working there. I will recall another incident about our former President Abdul Kalam. Once he was telling about this BrahMos program. He said, he got in, of course, he is our missile man. He knew a little about Russia's developed missile program, but when he visited Soviet Union for the first time in 1980, he could not really get access to the laboratories, to the construction bureaus. He couldn't react to the scientists at that point of time. But next time, 1981, he thought perhaps his Russian language would help him. And somebody told him, if you do two things, you would be able to get a lot of things in Russia. That is, if you know a bit of Russian language, and if you can drink a little bit of vodka. In 1981, when he met the eminent Soviet scientist Efremov, who is the real father of this BrahMos missile program. After that, Efremov opened the doors of his construction bureau, his laboratory in Moscow suburb, and this is how the BrahMos program began.
Professor Meeta Narayan, Chairperson, Center of Russian Studies, School of Language, Literature and Cultural Studies, JNU, also spoke on the occasion.
Не только потому, что это работа, конечно, огромная, но дело в том, какая методика мы употребляем для исполнения любой работы. И недавно я была здесь, и я смотрела, что методика, которая была употреблена для этого курса, это считается исключительно, потому что там аудио и видео курсы. И программа это outreach programs, to reach to the outreach. The Center of Russian Studies is going to have a number of activities to mark the 70th anniversary celebrations of Indo-Russian diplomatic relations, and we look upon IGNU for cooperating with us in such activities. I must extend my congratulations to Madam Anju, who has really worked hard towards this. But this is not the end. You know, etatol karna chala, as we say in Russian, is just the starting. And I'm sure as we proceed ahead, we will have more of such collaborative programs in which we can supplement each other. In fact, the material which they have created, if you go through that, it can be used by us, by JNU people, by people who have come here all the way from Allahabad to attend this program. It is an audio-visual program which caters to the very beginners, and it is a learning Russian through creativity. So that in that we can also use your material as well. We can provide our help academically, whatever you want. So many thanks for inviting me.
Dr. Arunim Bandyopadhyay, Associate Professor from Center of Russian Studies, School of Language, Literature and Cultural Studies, JNU, began on a lighter note, sharing his experience of writing study material for the certificate program with the concept of teaching language with no teacher.
I was a bit nervous because the basic idea of IGNO is that to teach the language where there is no teacher. So, before that, I never, in fact, thought of writing a material where there is no teacher. But then IGNO was, the administration here was kind enough to organize an orientation program for us, for the course writers, and we attended that. We learned a lot. So, keeping in mind that fact that when the student will learn language, there will be no teacher, no direct teacher-student contact. We tried our best to write this material.
Dr. Preeti Das, from Center for Russian and Central Asian Studies, School of International Studies, JNU, also shared her experience in the discussion. She was a part of the study material group.
The material we have worked on, it was definitely very different and very interesting for us to get into that whole thing. When he shared that we had the 4 members in the team, that is Professor C.N. Chakrabarti, Professor Amar Basu, me and Arunim. And had Professor Amar Basu and C.N. Chakrabarti not been there, it would have been really difficult.
Who are present here to
Academic counselors of Russian studies were honored in this meeting for their contribution. The launch of the certificate program in Russian language has the quality and capacity to reach the nooks and corners of India. With a shared status in both nations of special and privileged strategic partnership, there is a tremendous growth in the overall registrations for Russian language. According to Mr. Sergei Karmalito, the senior counselor, Russian Embassy, the roots of the bond between India and Russia go down deeper, spanning 1,000 years or more. He said there are instances of Indian names of mountains, rivers, etc. in Russia that goes to show the similarities between the two countries' topography and geography. Travelers and traders from Russia have journeyed to India many centuries back, and there are many similarities between Vedic Sanskrit and the Russian language. The two nations need to build further on such deep roots to bear more fruits. Friendship between India and Russia has withstood the test of time, and the only way now is to move further ahead, sharing and learning from each other. Mr. Sergei Carmelito further elucidated the roadmap for events to follow to mark 70 years of friendship between the two nations.
We have a roadmap that was approved by President Putin and your Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, in Goa. We have a roadmap of events for this year. That means it will not be organized within only April or several other months. It will have a follow-up during this year and maybe next year also. We'll have an annual sort of jubilation for this event. And there will be, apart from conferences, seminars, which were already held, there will be visits of Russian artists, there will be concerts in various cities of India, there will be exhibitions, and many other events. So just in the end of April, we held our traditional Russian-Indian festival in the valley of Kulu, in the small village of Nagar, where Rory family stayed for a long period, lived there, and that place became a second home for them. So we traditionally held this kind of events. So this year we'll again organize it. And there will be various other very cultural.
Dr. Naveen Kumar from the Department of Computer Science, IGNO, believed that sharing of information and communication technology would give great opportunities for students to exchange ideas.
Russia and India both are the technological partner since the beginning, after the independence. And we have various, technological sharing things, especially if you see the nuclear technology which we have shared and the satellite technology which we have shared. And also, like nowadays, if you see in the current scenario, this need is emerging more, and these ICT technologies which we are having, these can help.
Computer technology.
Yeah, the computer technology, information and communication technology, which has emerged globally, and we all have been now connected.
Correct.
So through this ICT, now this collaboration of science and technology with the Russia and India, this collaboration and sharing of technology is easier. So we have to find out the new ways that how this kind of joint projects, small projects where the Indian students can go there in the Russian sites and they can come here, and we both can come up with the new ideas. This is one thing which is missing nowadays, we can say. A lot of students are going from here, from India, to outside for studying the medical science courses particularly.
Right.
But the other courses, the technological courses and the information technology, the mathematical courses, the ratio of students.
There's so much more.
Yeah, a lot of students should go to the Russia, because Russia has very, very, very rich technological base and mathematical base. Because of their own government policies or something, I guess, they are not sharing their knowledge much globally as the US and British Europeans people are doing. So this kind of sharing can be done once we will go to their site and they can come to us. So we can come up with a lot of new ideas, a lot of new projects, and it ultimately it will be good
Benefits
for
both the countries.
Yeah, and the human race ultimately.
India and Russia has always been very great friends to each other, whether it is Soviet Union or whether it's present Russia. We have always enjoyed great relations whether it's diplomatic, political, economic, or people to people.
Right.
So that is why it marks such a auspicious beginning, because at IGNOU also today we have just launched our certificate in Russian language with more than hundreds of registration which is happening all over the India.
The world literature is incomplete if we don't discuss major Russian literary figures such as Leo Tolstoy, Pasternak, and Dostoevsky. So in coming years, we will take up these authors and will introduce those figures in other ways also. So in terms of our, science and technology, there is going to be more collaborations, and I see a very fertile field in terms of Indo-Russian relations at the level of academia.
He was sanguine that with a rich tradition of both nations, there is much to be shared and learned.
The centuries-old history of the Indo-Russian ties shows how the relationship between the two countries have gone far beyond the regular protocol of interstate ties. It will not be wrong to call Russia as one of India's all-weather friends, and we hope that it always remains so. This was Shivani Pandey for DD India.